Hello, I am Georgina Rose. I am a perennialist, polytheist, and Thelemite, and welcome back to another episode of the Pagan Perspectives podcast. This podcast is supposed to be, allegedly, me discussing mundane topics that we deal with in our day to day lives and how to use esotericism to remedy or resolve those topics. Now, with time, this podcast has evolved into the esoteric yapping hour. And you know what? I'm kind of cool with it. You guys seem cool with it. So that's what we're rocking with. And in this episode, we're going to discuss. I have two kind of titles for this. I don't know which one will be on the episode. And it's either The Divine Feminine Won't Save You or The True Authentic Divine Feminine. Though, honestly, knowing me, I could title it something entirely else entirely. And basically, what this episode is about is the various ways that people have used the divine feminine to avoid responsibility, to avoid things they don't like, to hide from reality, and basically corrupt the divine feminine into something divorced from what the authentic divine feminine truly is. I've hit onto this thought a number of times. I've mentioned it in videos, I've mentioned it in Substack essays. This is not some new complaint from me, but I really do think it's escalating. And there was a big kind of news story about that came out about last week from The Guardian. Relating to the Free Birth Society, that I think really sparked me to want to discuss this again. Basically, people not understanding what the divine feminine really is and how we should relate to the divine feminine is, of course, leading to destruction within people's lives, but now it is also leading to severe trauma and lasting damage. So I want to discuss what the real divine feminine is, what the divine feminine should be, and all the ways that people have taken this vitally important metaphysical topic and corrupted it into something that, you know what, I will use the word dangerous, I will use the word toxic, and I will use the word destructive. If I was, a bit more Christian inclined, I might even say demonic. I think people are taking the divine feminine and turning it into something alien, something strange, and something that doesn't resemble the real divine feminine. So, before I get into all of this, and this is a little bit of a darker episode, to be honest, I do want to bring some light into the conversation and some joy into the conversation. This month, it's December, and I have been teasing for a while now that I'm doing this like secret project. A couple months ago, I posted, looking for people who want to write for a digital journal, looking for, cover artists, looking for illustrators, and on December 21st, I'm actually announcing what this project is and sort of dropping the first part of it. This project, it is the digital journal is part of it. Okay. So there will be a digital journal where twice a month there'll be, articles and art from new people that explore esoteric topics. That I'll be hosting on a website, but there is also more going on. There is a huge sort of multimedia project that I've been working on in secret for the past year. And I'm finally going to explain what in the world is going on December 21st. I'm doing it at 10:03 a.m., though it may be a little sooner or a little later because reality doesn't always work exactly perfectly like that. But around 10:03 a.m., I am announcing everything. And I will be announcing it on the podcast. I'm going to make a big announcement video, and an audio version of that is going to be put up on the podcast that morning. So, yeah, a lot's happening, and there is something within the project that people have been wanting me to do for years. Okay, so there's so much happening. There's a digital journal and there's more. So just stay tuned. And yeah, I'm so excited. I really wish I could reveal it now, but I've promised myself I will hold it in. I'm not very good at secrets, to be completely honest, hence why I've dropped a bunch of hints. But yeah, it'll be really, really cool and exciting. So, anyways, back to the divine feminine. So, let's talk about the corruption and the desecration and the destruction of the divine feminine, of the divine mysteries of the feminine power. So, first, I want to talk about what the divine feminine actually is briefly. I mean, that's going to come up a lot during this episode, but for those who are not too familiar, what is the divine feminine? So, divine feminine is a metaphysical principle that is the principle of severity or receptivity. So, when we look at the construction of the universe, we understand there are two divine principles, the masculine and the feminine. The masculine generates, and the feminine receives and shapes. A good way to think about this is to think about human conception, basically the fertilization of sperm and egg, because it's a very obvious and literal example that I think gets the point across really well. So when someone's conceiving a baby, obviously the sperm releases. And as the sperm sort of swims towards the egg selects the best sperm and the rest die. The egg culls the generations that cannot exist. And then the egg chooses the best sperm of all, and then that is allowed in by the divine feminine, and then new life begins, a perfected form. So what is the divine feminine doing? The divine feminine is in charge of all selection, culling, destruction, and it must do this or things would go crazy. If every sperm, could live, then you would have like a million babies per pregnancy, and obviously that would go bad. Yeah, you just explode. So obviously, divine feminine is all of those things. The divine feminine is selection, receptivity, severity, and all the themes related to that. Divine feminine is the yin of the yin yang equation, and it's a powerful and beautiful force. As well, the divine feminine is not evil, it is simply severe. Those are not the same thing. Metaphysical evil, is something that is opposed to the cosmic order, opposed to the cosmos existing. I think of metaphysical evil as like a black hole, right? A black hole is not consuming in order to create something new, it is simply consuming for the sake of consumption. The divine feminine restricts, but it is only because it is creating something new. Without the divine feminine's restriction, the universe would not exist. There would just be endless generation, and things wouldn't work. There would be no world. So the divine feminine has nothing to do with a lot of the things people put the words divine feminine in front of, because the divine feminine is a metaphysical principle. The divine feminine is not, and let's go through a list. The divine feminine is not an aesthetic. The divine feminine is not a vibe. The divine feminine is not a aura. The divine feminine is not a movement. The divine feminine is not a way to avoid things you don't like about life. And it is also not a sort of brand or trendy hashtag. Unfortunately, that last one kind of does exist a little bit, but it shouldn't, right? The divine feminine is a metaphysical reality, a piece of the objective truth that exists in all religions and in all cultures throughout the beginning of time. Even in the earliest written documents from the human race, there are mentions of the divine feminine and its powers, right, through the goddess Inanna Ishtar, the first divine feminine being that is written about. So, the divine feminine is real, objective, and means something. The divine feminine is not something you can slap in front of things and expect to exist in a new form. But the divine feminine is becoming a social media trend. It has been for a long time, and I don't expect this one to go down. Obviously, when like witchcraft became a social media trend, it kind of like peaked and then died off. I actually don't think the divine feminine will die off in this way. I think it'll simply morph around, because when I think about like the divine feminine becoming a social media trend, it kind of has existed in a few forms and a few different variants. Like I think the first sort of divine feminine that I remember seeing online was this divine feminine that was this very like wild woman, free yourself, liberation type divine feminine. Like it was a whole like, unchain the wild woman, unchain yourself from society, release the wolf within. Very like women who run with the wolves. If you guys have read that book, like it very much felt like that to me. Like be feral, embrace the goddess, free yourself from society, and honor the goddess. Like this, it's almost kind of like witchy in a way. I feel like this really overlaps with witchcraft and like why people got into witchcraft. But then you get the next version of it, and this was kind of when like I feel like there was a trend probably 3 years ago where people really wanted to be like traditionalist. I don't think that's as much of a thing now, to be completely honest, but it definitely had a moment. I think that movement was really killed by people discovering that a lot of accounts that were in it were run by like men who had like porn addictions, who were doing it as like a fetish. I think that kind of killed it because, women don't really want to be part of that. But basically, there was a thing where women wanted to like, return to the home, return to being kind of traditional. And there was a specific flavor of that really like people would use like divine feminine language, where they would be like stepping into my divine feminine by quitting my job and by making sourdough all day, stepping into my divine feminine by drinking raw milk and eating beef tallow and all of this. And then there's this like current iteration of it. I think that's actually that trad version is a little bit in the past, but I think the current version right now is this soft life divine feminine, where basically like people think of the divine feminine as like living a soft life, and the soft life is basically code for a life where you get showered in presents, you don't have to work, you don't have to have kids either. So you get less responsibilities because the trad woman does have to have children. Like that's a lot of work. But if you're in the soft life, you don't even have to get married. You basically like get to like lounge around and burn really expensive candles, and people just worship you for the sake of being worshipped, and like maybe you take a Pilates class here and there, right? These are the kind of pop divine feminine archetypes. And if we consider these don't really have anything in common. To be completely honest, like these are really disparate ideas and lifestyles that are all being thrown together, right? Perhaps someone could create like a dialectical synthesis of these things, but these are really different desires. Like being like a wild woman in the woods who gets naked and runs around screaming to honor Hecate versus like being like a sourdough girl in her like milkmaid dress with her 19 children, a la Ballerina Farm, or being like a soft life girl who just has, life in a Manhattan apartment paid for her while she lounges around drinking a red wine and, maybe going to reformer Pilates with her glass of matcha sometimes. Like these are really different things, right? Those are also very different feminine archetypes, to be completely honest, because these are kind of like, if I think about it, like the social media feminine archetypes, which is really funny to even use that phrase, but you know what I'm saying? These aren't the same femininity. These three trends, right? And if you look at like divine femininity bloggers, you can pretty easily like slot them into one of these three categories. I hope you guys cannot swap me into any of these categories, but yeah, these are kind of the images. And let's be honest, none of those really relate to the metaphysical concept of the divine feminine. In some ways, they do. There's even some of it appearing in all of those different archetypes, but none of them really encapsulate what the divine feminine means, like what it means to be a divine feminine person. Because also I want to talk about something that does exist in all of these. The one thing that I do actually see as a through line, and that is the phrasing of stepping into your divine feminine or aligning with your divine feminine, or some sort of rhetoric where it basically implies that you have to do something or change something in order to be divine feminine. And I want to unpack that because I don't actually think that's inherently true. Inherently. Emphasis on the word inherently. I think there's some truth and some resonance to this idea in that if you want to get closer to the divine feminine, especially if you want to get closer to a goddess, you do have to do things, right? To grow and have a really devotional relationship to a goddess, change has to happen. But this idea of stepping into a divine feminine, I kind of reject that because as a woman, you inherently have a connection to the divine feminine current. There's nothing you need to do as a woman to become divine feminine. As well, the divine feminine is a metaphysical principle. It's not like a state of being. Like there are some metaphysical things that are states of being, like mindfulness or true will. Like those are states of being. But I wouldn't call the divine feminine a state of being. It's a principle. It's like I step into destruction, I step into receptivity, I step into severity. You see what I'm saying? When I use any other word that means divine feminine, that phrase kind of stops making sense. Whereas if I said, like, I step into true will, I step into Zen, I step into gnosis, right? Those do make sense. The divine feminine is one of those spiritual concepts that I don't really think you step into. Now, I do think you can honor it and you can bring more of it in. That I think is possible, but I don't think you can like align with it in this same way. Because of course you can invoke it, you can bring it in, you can invite it in, you can honor it, and so you can kind of seemingly increase the amount of divine feminine in your life and increase, your relationship to specific feminine archetypes. But you can't suddenly become divine feminine if you're a woman. You already are divine feminine. There's nothing that you inherently need to do. I also want to bring up here cultural notions of femininity and divine femininity are not the same concept. I think people get really twisted about this. I think a lot of people think divine feminine equals feminine, and feminine equals whatever is feminine at the time. Because what is feminine culturally, I do think is somewhat relative. Now, there are some things that do kind of like repeat to the point where it's like, okay, maybe that is fundamentally part of cultural femininity, but a lot of things don't. Like, say, whether your hair should be short or long, whether or not you should, work, or whether or not you should wear specific colors or style your clothes specific ways. Like, all of that does change based on cultural and temporal context. And we're talking about metaphysical principles. A key thing with metaphysical principles is that they do not change based on cultural or temporal context, unless it is something like, say, an aeonic shift. But an aeonic shift also, once again, has nothing to do with cultural context. Any spiritual system that uses the ideas of ages, yugas, aeons, those happen really, really slowly. Like they last for, I mean, thousands and thousands of years. They don't shift in the way that a micro trend of what it means to be feminine shifts, right? So stop thinking about cultural femininity. If you want to think about cultural femininity and you want advice about that or coaching about that, I don't think that's a problem if people want to make blogs about like how to be more feminine in the cultural context or whatever, but I think they need to like take the esotericism out of it if they're going to do that. If you're going to talk about like what it means to be a feminine woman, like just say that. Don't be like what it means to be a divine feminine woman, because that's just not the same thing. Like being, making some blog about like how to style your hair better and like be more quote unquote feminine, like I think that's a different thing. And I think people who do that need to take the divine branding out, because like why are you ascribing yourself to the pillar of severity if all you're doing is giving advice on how to like bake bread or whatever, which I think people should be allowed to do. I don't really find that like problematic or something. I just think they shouldn't brand it as something metaphysical when they're not even trying to imply that metaphysics. I think it's confusing because some people, when they do this blogging, they really do try to imply the metaphysics and they get the metaphysics wrong. So why now do I think there's a big divine feminine moment? I do want to talk about like why this is happening, because I don't think it's random. I think as a culture right now, especially amongst people my age, because I do think this divine feminine blogging thing does skew younger. I think it does skew to, I would say like late millennial, early Gen Z seem to be most invested in this. I think Gen Alpha are still too busy watching skibbity toilet Cocomelon brain rot videos to have thoughts on the divine feminine. But definitely I'd say late millennial Gen Z is like the target demographic of this. Like when I think of people who really push this type of divine feminine, like think the wizard Liz, not the lizard Wiz. The wizard Liz, she's not a lizard. A little bit of a tongue twister in the name there though. She is like maybe 25, probably. I mean, looking at her, she looks about 25 to me. So, I'm talking about teenagers into like maybe early 30s are kind of interested in this stuff, and are, sharing this type of stuff. Why is it that age group? I think it's that age group, which I'm part of, so I can speak a little bit from my own experience too, are kind of like going through a little bit of a rough time. Look, we had it hard, right? We grew up during the recession. We were told, all you have to do is like go to college and you'll get a job. And for a lot of people, that just didn't happen, right? A lot of us are underemployed. A lot of us think we're never going to own a home. Like that's become like a joke, but like that's a real fear. A lot of us are worried we'll never be able to have a family, or if we have a family, we'll have to make extreme sacrifices and we'll give our family a much worse life than we had. You know, we're worried AI is going to replace us next week. We feel detached from our bodies. I think tech is a big part of that. I think people are basically like disconnected from what it means to be a human being. And we're scared. Like I think Gen Z is really, really scared. I think there's a reason why people my age are, kind of going into extremes with politics in both directions, converting religions a lot, like I think a lot of that stems from the fundamental fears that we face, and I think those fears are as legitimate as they come. I'm scared about most of these things, to be completely honest, and pretty much everyone I know my age is. A lot of us, we feel like we're falling behind with our life milestones, but at the same time we feel as if society is rigged against us and we can never reach those milestones. Like it's really grim. And when we look at the complaints that say like Gen X had about society, we're like, wow, I wish I had those problems. You know what I mean? We envy the older generations, but it's all out of reach for us. And, our parents grew up in such different worlds that they can't really give us like proper advice on how to deal with these situations, right? These are very common fears and tendencies. And so when you're scared about the world, you want safety. And I think a lot of people think these ideas of the divine feminine will save them. And as well, since all of us grew up online, to be completely honest, we grew up with the idea of subculture or community. We believe that all things belong in categories, within tropes, within essentially techno archetypes. And if we are able to fully embody a techno archetype, maybe the world won't be so scary. Maybe things won't be so bad. Maybe we'll be able to get the life that we were promised, that we believed was ahead of us, that now feels out of reach. If we can follow these step-by-step guides on how to be the most divine feminine, then suddenly everything will work out and we'll be able to, get that job we wanted and have that family and no longer feel like we're falling behind and like AI is going to replace us, and maybe even have community, go out to dinner or to the bar and everyone's not on their phones and be together, right? We're looking for a solution and we're looking to be saved. And the divine feminine, to us women sounds like something that can save us. And the real divine feminine can help us, but even that cannot save us. No archetype will save you. The divine feminine is not coming to save you. The authentic divine feminine, if anything, is going to challenge you and test you and be hard. Like the divine feminine, this is the destructive principle. This is the receptive principle. This is not the principle of softness and meekness in most forms. Divine feminine's hard. Even the most, stereotypically soft and mild forms of femininity hold a lot of weight. Like, think about a maternal archetype, a motherly archetype. The mother, of course, nurtures her children, but at the same time, she has to constantly be vigilant and aware of how they can be hurt, how they need to be protected. The mother is equal parts nurturer and mama bear, working to protect her cub. And Mother Nature, right? That kind of Gaia nature archetype. Nature is beautiful. Nature is the streams and the waterfalls and the flies and the hair. But at the same time, nature is horrifying. Nature is destruction. Nature is death. Nature is the hunt, right? Nature outlives us too, right? Nature is equal parts friendly and scary. And there is no divine feminine archetype that truly exists on a metaphysical level that isn't both of these things. And if we want to approach those archetypes and truly embody them, not in the way that we're stepping into it in a trope way, but stepping into it in a metaphysical way through initiation and ritual, we have to face the dark. You will never fully be one with the divine feminine if you cannot face the dark and if you keep running. Because I think a lot of these divine feminine attempts are attempts to run away from the feminine, to hide. Now, I do think a big thing that has added to this, and I call this the specter of the girl boss. Okay, so there's this trope in pop culture and popular discourse of the girl boss, and kind of this idea that like Gen Z was told all our lives that we should like become a girl boss and embody this archetype, this techno archetype of the girl boss. And who is the girl boss? The girl boss is fiercely independent, hardworking, and critically is a girl who is a boss. She, runs some high power, like CEO type business, and she works really hard and she doesn't need community. She doesn't need anyone else, right? And this archetype has become like a specter in society because people are like assuming that, first of all, that all women are girl bosses or that like all women trying to become girl bosses destroy them. And I want to unpack the girl boss because fundamentally, for the girl boss to exist, there can only be so many of her, right? There's only so many people who can run like multinational corporations. Like, how many people can really, like, how many people do you know? Actually, I question you. How many people do you know that are actual girl bosses? And no, I don't mean the girl who like, runs a small business or like works in an office. I'm sure you know plenty of those. But I mean the person who when I think of girl boss, like the person who coined the term girl boss, ran a company called Nasty Gal, which is a fast fashion empire. And, she was a CEO of a fast fashion empire, right? How many people do you know who are running fast fashion empires? Like it can't be that many. You guys can't know that many girl bosses. And if you do, you're in very niche circles. Your average like young woman is not running a multinational corporation. Okay, maybe she runs a small business, maybe she's an entrepreneur, maybe she runs a yoga studio or something like that, or maybe she's like high up in a law firm that's like a local law firm or something. But like realistically, there cannot be that many girl bosses because fundamentally, like there's only so many of those jobs. Like there's only a couple, and honestly, I don't think most women ever really wanted that life. Like I think that's a very kind of specific type of person, and maybe they exist. It seems like a lot of them exist in San Francisco based on what I've seen on Twitter. But I kind of think this girl boss archetype has become a specter of horror in people's minds. Like they're like, oh, all women want to be this girl, and I don't think that's true. And also, I don't think that many women are like sitting in their bedroom at night and like laying there and going, "Oh my God, I haven't started my multinational Amazon corporation. I haven't opened another fast fashion empire where slave children make polyester slop that will end up in landfills next year." Like, I don't really think that's a neurosis or a person women are aspiring to achieve. Also, I think people get off this and then they go in this crazy direction. So people are like, oh, not everyone can be a girl boss, which obviously not. Not everyone can be the 1% of the 1%. That's just basic economics. And then they go on this like weird tirade of like, because not all women can be the girl bosses, women are like hormonally incapable of working. Like women's like hormones are too weak, like because they have like a period, so they can't like work an office job. And that's obviously delusion because women have worked harder jobs for a lot of history. I mean, if anything, a cushy office job is pretty nice, to be completely honest, compared to so many things. But then they also go into directions of like, well, women are too fragile, and there's this fragility with this weird discourse that I think is detached from reality. That's just not real. Because if women are too fragile to wake up at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. to go to their 9 a.m. job, how can they handle children who scream and wake you up at 2 in the morning? Like, it's very disrespectful. I think this weird hormonal like thing is really disrespectful to more traditional women. Like, it bothers me on that level too, because it's like, well, being a girl boss is hard, which obviously being a high powered CEO is hard. Okay, I don't think anyone's contesting that. And they're like, well, that's why you should like be a housewife with 10 kids, and I'm like, that's also hard. Why are you disrespecting those women by saying that they have like an easy job, that they could never handle being the girl boss because they have a period? Like, I find that's actually disrespectful to both of these women. Also, most women are neither of these categories, right? Most women are not the boss babe, and most women are also not like having 10 children, right? Like, neither of these exist as like a spectrum of a person. Most people, like if I think of the average woman I know, right? She like has a job or a part-time job, but also has like 2 or 3 kids. I think that's like more your average woman, is kind of like that person. Or she's younger and she's getting herself established, right? When you're just getting yourself established, you can't really like fantasize about running your fast fashion empire, to be completely honest. So it's just this whole discourse I actually think is detached from reality. But I think this discourse has become like a specter in people's minds that have implanted the divine feminine like weirdness in people's minds, where they're like, well, I can't be a CEO girl boss. And no, you probably can't. So now I've got to like be in my divine feminine energy and like constantly think about my hormones and like not work. Which, if you have kids, I mean, you're going to be doing something harder than your average 9 to 5 job. And I think it's disrespectful to mothers to claim that an average 9 to 5 job is harder than being a mother, because I don't think that's fundamentally true. But, anyways, let's pretend it is. And let's just be at home. And where this gets weird is when you look deeper, a lot of these people don't even want to be mothers. They just want to be at home. They just want to be cuddled. They just want to not do hard things. I don't think they're even scared of the girl boss. I don't think they even want to be the wife. I think they just want to do nothing. And this got me thinking about a book I was reading recently, this kind of discussion, called Goddesses and Every Women. And that is a really good book. It's by a Jungian psychiatrist, about women's psychology. And there's an archetype within this, called the Persephone archetype. And the Persephone archetype is the archetype of the little girl, of the infantilized woman. And the Persephone archetype is that moody teenage girl archetype, right? She's emotional, she's intense, and she is kind of childish. She feels really strongly, and she's not grounded anywhere. And, in your typical woman, she is the Persephone through her teen years and perhaps her young adult years, but then eventually ages out of that. And Persephone is inherently a limited role, because what happens to Persephone? She only is the girl in the meta for so long. Eventually, she is abducted by Hades and taken into the underworld. And then that is her sort of harsh initiation into adult womanhood. And I really recommend reading that book. There's also a good channel on here, called Galatea and Actus. It's on YouTube. And she's done some really long, like 2 hour plus videos on the Persephone syndrome and like this infantilized femininity that I think is really, really helpful to watch and I find really profound. So I really do recommend listening to those. Those definitely influence some of what I'm going to say. But unlike that channel, I actually am explicitly a like pagan and divine feminine believer. I'm not just, interested in like archetypes and psychology. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is not a desire to be the mother and the wife or a desire to be the girl boss. I think it's a desire to be a child. Like, I think it's a desire to not grow up because the world is really scary. And so they use this like spiritual bypassing of saying it's divine feminine to try to like I even see like there was a rhetoric that went around that I found very, very honest for a long time. Where people were making these videos about being there were two versions of it. There was stay at home girlfriend and stay at home daughter. And these two trends are basically where you don't get married, you don't have kids, you don't work a job, and you basically stay at home and like go shopping all day. Like, I'm not joking. That's what these trends were. There was the stay at home daughter, and there's a number of them on TikTok. You can watch their videos. And a lot of it, it's like they wake up and they go shopping at like designer stores, and then they eat snacks and they have brunch with their girlies, and then they go home. Stay at home girlfriend is another genre that's similar, where basically like all these apartments are like, I mean, $10,000 plus apartments. I do want to mention that this does it's kind of like this is like a fantasy of wealth. Okay, okay. But anyways, yeah, stay-at-home girlfriend. Basically, they don't work, they don't have kids, they don't get married, they don't do any house cleaning, they don't do any cooking, right? They literally just like get things given to them, and they get taken care of by the boyfriend. And on the surface, I do think this is like a rich lifestyle that most people will never have. But I see why it's idealistic. You don't have to do anything. I mean, you just get waited on all day. That's a pleasant idea until you have a deep spiritual crisis because humans desire to work, humans desire to put in effort, humans desire to have challenges and ordeals. So this would be satisfying for like probably like a year maximum. But then after that, I mean, I feel like there'd be a deep, profound crisis of purpose, crisis of true will, and question as to what do you truly desire, because people like doing things, right? People like, even if it's like something artistic, like people like painting all day. They like contributing poetry to the world. They like writing. They like having kids. They like working. Like people like doing things. Women are not like void canvases that aspire to do nothing. And these women who are these void canvases to aspire to do nothing, they probably don't even feel that way. They are just overcompensating for their fears, their fundamental fear of failure, of loss, of rejection. Because that's what I think this is. I think when you're stuck in the Persephone syndrome, the infantilized woman, you're afraid of failing, right? You're afraid of getting a job and not getting one you wanted, or never getting a job, or not succeeding at motherhood, like say having, infertility, or being a bad parent, or you're afraid of following, say a creative endeavor, because that's also a really awesome path. Like say you want to be an artist, right? You're scared nobody's going to ever buy your paintings. They're going to think you're shit, right? To step into maturity, to step into adulthood and to reality, you have to face risk and loss, and you may fail, and you may, bad things may happen. And the idea of having a soft life, one with no challenges, one where you can just lounge around all day and eat caviar, is very appealing, because in that life there is no challenge. But if there is no challenge, there is no rebirth, there is no life, there is no death. Life is meant to be hard, and that hard isn't always bad. Also, another thing I want to talk about with the soft life divine feminine thing, and this is one that bothers me a lot, is the soft life divine feminine thing is taking girls who have these kind of complexes and tricking them into escorting. Let's be real. A lot of this soft life content is escorting. Okay? No one said it, and no one wants to say it, but it's true. One of the most sort of public faces of this divine feminine coaching is the Wizard Liz. The Wizard Liz is a YouTuber and podcaster. I am naming her because she's much bigger than me. She doesn't know I exist, and I feel like she's powerful enough that she's worth talking about. Basically, she makes all these videos about how to like respect yourself and how to, get over your problems and how to be divine feminine. And honestly, a lot of her like life advice is generally good. Like the stuff she says about like how to deal with like, not letting yourself be walked all over upon, how to get over a breakup, like all that advice I tend to agree with. Like it's typically pretty good advice. But where it gets weird is she views men as like objects. She thinks that, men are meant to just pay you money, which, let's get into why I think this is escorting really quickly. So she thinks like to go on a date with her, you should have to pay her. And recently, there was a big scandal where she was 4 months pregnant at the time. She's probably like 7 or 8 months pregnant now. But when she was 4 months pregnant, her boyfriend cheated on her, and she publicly talked about it. And then she confessed that she took her boyfriend back, and also no boyfriend, not husband. She took him back because he paid her $10,000. So she basically named a price to tolerate him cheating on her while she is pregnant with his daughter. Or son. I think it's a daughter. I'm pretty sure it's a daughter. And basically she took him back. And I find that such brazen disrespect for the self. Like I think that's such a low view of the individual, but also like it's escorting. I'm sorry. When I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. Because she talks about how on every date he gives her money. And there's other even more extreme examples. There's this woman on TikTok called the Sprinkle Lady. I can't believe I'm saying that in a serious context, but she's called like Sprinkle. And Sprinkle is now like a whole hashtag where it's basically like dating advice for quote unquote feminine women. And by feminine women, they mean escorts, where basically like you like go to like, I'm gonna describe this and tell me this isn't like escorting advice. So you like go to a bar and like in a ritzy hotel, and you sit in a chair and you wait for a rich man to talk to you, and you make sure he pays you before you sleep with him. That's escorting. Like I don't know any way around it. Or like every time you go on a date, he should pay you. Like it's I think some of these women, especially in the really explicit, sprinkle category, are trying to give like escorting advice, but like think, the algorithm will ban you if you post a video that's like how to be a really good escort. Like that's not allowed. So they're like, oh, I'm gonna call it divine femininity tips. But what has happened is it's not escorts listening to that, it's random girls. And so random girls are like going to hotel bars and picking up men, and then they fuck the guy, and then the guy wakes up and gives them money and is like, oh, what's your price, or how much did you cost, and then they're freaking out, like you just behaved like an escort, like what do you expect? And think about any of this. Does any of this have anything to do with those early divine feminine things I talked about? The principles of receptivity, the principles of restriction. No, it doesn't. Absolutely nothing. There is nothing but that is a through line between Bina and Gevora and being an escort on TikTok and calling it sprinkle sprinkle and tricking teenage girls into this behavior. It's repulsive, actually. Like, it's straight up repulsive. And I want to talk about where someone might make a counter argument is, oh, if the divine feminine is about being receptive, how is this not being receptive? You're being receptive to the man's wallet. You're being receptive to his Amex Black card. And not exactly. Passivity and receptivity are two different things. This is passivity. Passivity. Okay? Passivity is sitting there and letting things happen to you. Receptivity is taking things and forging something new. Think about the sperm and the egg example, because I think it's a really, really good metaphor. What happens? The sperm comes at the egg. The egg doesn't go, oh, well, I'm a meek little princess, and take all the sperm, and then you're pregnant with a million babies and you explode. No, the egg selects. The egg chooses the best sperm of all, right? The egg chooses it. And then through pregnancy, it evolves and it grows, right? The feminine is the selector and fundamentally the incubator of greater things, right? The feminine is not just like, lay there and let things happen to you. No, the feminine is active, right? It's not active in the sense the masculine is active, but it's active in the sense that it does things. The feminine is not lazy. And it is so, so disrespectful to all of your female ancestors, no matter what role in society they held, to claim that being the divine feminine, being feminine is lazy. It is a slap in all of their faces. You are disrespecting your ancestors. You are taking them and spitting on them. You are insulting every single woman, and you are insulting the goddess. You are committing blasphemy. You are doing something absolutely disgusting and despicable from a spiritual perspective when you turn being divine feminine into being receptive. It's not receptive, I mean passive, and being a do nothing all day. You may as well lie on the Victorian fainting couch, because all you will do is faint on that couch and not achieve enlightenment, not achieve gnosis. The great work will never happen to you if you keep up this behavior. Now, let's talk about the other extreme. So there's another extreme form of divine feminine rhetoric, and I mentioned this in the opener a little bit. And this takes it to the whole other direction. This is the divine feminine as extreme female sovereignty, to the point where it can be a little bit much. So I mentioned the Free Birth Society. So the Free Birth Society is a organization, a media company. I don't know. It's a community, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a group of women ran by this one woman, Emily Saldea, who teach how to do this thing called free birth. Free birth is where you birth unassisted, so you give birth like in your house with no midwives, doctors, or doulas present. But it actually goes further than that, because Free Birth Society pushes unassisted pregnancy or wild pregnancy, which is basically where you get no medical or midwifery care during pregnancy. You don't even take a pregnancy test. And they're recently under extreme scandal because even beyond that, they have been saying that neonatal resuscitation is a violation of the baby's will. If the baby wants to breathe, they will breathe, and you should not assist a newborn baby who is struggling to breathe to breathe. This has resulted in stillbirth. There have been, I think it's like 49 cases of stillbirth somewhat associated with this group. And I will also say other free birthers, like other unassisted childbirth type people, have been speaking out against this and saying that they don't represent all of unassisted childbirth. You can debate the ethics of like unassisted childbirth as a premise. I think we can all agree that the Free Birth Society are really extreme, and the whole neonatal resuscitation thing in particular is really fucked up and messed up. I think giving birth unassisted, there's been a lot of discussion if that should be legal or not. I do think it should be legal. I don't know how I feel about it, but I do think it should. You should be allowed. I don't think we should like legally require women to give birth in a hospital or something. I think that is like I think that's a real attack on women's sovereignty. But fundamentally, yes, basically these extreme believers in like divine feminine sovereignty are saying that like, sovereignty is such an important spiritual principle that like, the baby has to breathe on its own, right? You're not going to give it CPR. You're not going to do that. Obviously, that's bad. I don't really think I need to explain why that's bad. I would hope I don't need to. You can read the Guardian piece if you're curious. It's all on the Guardian. It's like So just look up Free Birth Society Guardian on Google, it'll come up. But yeah, so this is taking sovereignty to the other extreme. So instead of like the divine feminine being a passive woman on the fainting couch, the divine feminine is having radical and complete responsibility over all of your actions at all times. And that can lead to a really extreme place where you get really, really wild beliefs. I think sovereignty is a big part of the divine feminine. I think being sovereign and being a sovereign, empowered being is really, really good. I think we should all strive to be more sovereign and less dependent on others. We should know how to like use herbal medicine. We should know how to do some of this stuff on our own. But when that sovereignty starts, slipping into basically what I would call a rejection of community, that's when I think it becomes a bit unhinged. We've always had community, we've always had people, and the divine feminine does not exist in isolation in the way these kind of communities want it to, right? The divine feminine exists when we come together, when we form groups and communities. And ironically, this community built around having no community is a community, it's large. And it is kind of giving a lot of women a sisterhood thing. And I think we should create sisterhoods. I think we should create, places where us women can all come together and honor the goddess, honor the divine feminine, and worship as a group. So I think just basically, be sovereign, but don't be so sovereign that you're insane, right? Be sovereign within reason, right? We have other people for a reason, and you don't have to prove it to anyone. I feel like a lot of this is like trying to prove how sovereign you are by like doing crazy things. Like you don't have to prove your sovereignty. Your sovereignty is inherent, and within you, your divine feminine is inherent, and within you, you don't need to do these like elaborate things like not resuscitating your baby and filming yourself not resuscitating your baby. Yes, that happened. In order to prove how sovereign and independent and wild woman you are. You can be that wild woman archetype while also, having a bit of sense. Now I want to explore kind of like how we should relate to the divine feminine. I've talked a lot about how not to, like what not to do, what not to be led towards, but like I want to talk now about like the positive, like what should your relationship with the divine feminine mean? What should it be like to honor the goddess? Like what should that actually be? So to truly honor the goddess, to truly connect to the goddess and get close to it and connect to the divine feminine on a real level. The first thing you have to do is you have to do some shadow work, okay? You have to look into the icky parts and the uncomfortable parts of yourself. Because if you do that, you won't do any of this crap, right? You won't accidentally become an escort. You won't, like become infantilized, and you won't become so obsessed with your independence that you're putting other people in danger, right? Because you'll understand who you are and you'll understand where these pains are coming from. Because I think all of these like false divine feminine movements come from points of pain and trauma, whether it's societal or internal. It could be the societal, like you feel like you have no sovereignty over your body. You feel as if tech is, turning medicine into something it isn't. You feel like the medical paradigm is oppressing you in some way, or you feel like you'll never get a good job you want, so why would I not just be a stay-at-home girlfriend? Or you feel that men don't treat you well enough, so of course they should pay you for every date, right? Like all of those ideas and those thoughts actually I think come from extreme points of pain and trauma. And a lot of those criticisms are things that should be listened to, and there are things that should be changed about our society and world. So why don't we do that? Why don't we look within ourselves, and why don't we actually like band together as a sisterhood and try to fix society instead of ruin our lives in the process, right? What if we actually help ourselves instead of destroying ourselves? What if we build each other up instead of tearing ourselves down? Maybe that's a bit too optimistic. You know what? That is a little optimistic. It's hopeful though. I maintain the hope. It's maybe a little too optimistic, but I do think there's some hope in that. But at the very least, you can help yourself. You can connect to the real divine feminine. You can learn the real metaphysical principles of the divine feminine. You can learn the goddesses. You can learn the archetype, and you can actually honor the goddess from your heart and do the shadow work to have a healthy and positive and transformative relationship with the divine feminine in your own life. Hail the goddess and bring her in, and you will be transformed forever. So this has been a pretty unique episode, I'll just say. I think I kind of started like yelling at one point, honestly. Like I was getting kind of loud now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, this was feisty. If you want a pre-show that is a little less feisty and a little more light and pleasant, go on the podcast Patreon. This podcast is supported by Patreon, and you also get all early access to the podcast if you join the Patreon. Like you get it early, which is really fun and cool. And also, you get a bonus episode 8 times a year. So there'll be one later this month, right before my announcement. Can you guess? My announcement is on the 21st, which is the solstice. As well, I am darling. I am on YouTube, Twitter /X /Xsitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Check me out all of those places, and you will get access to all sorts of things. A lot of it's public, so there's a lot more of me everywhere. I hope you have an amazing day, afternoon, mid evening, mid morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Bye.